Hey everybody, welcome to Illustration Masterclass on this very fine Friday, coming to you here from North Carolina. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the chat if you're watching over on Behance, please. Great to see you all and thank you for being here. Now, if you're watching elsewhere, just note that I am following the live chat over on Behance. That's be.net/live. Just think of our good pal Bill Shakespeare, to be or not to be. be.net/Adobe Live. All right, today we're going to talk about something really fun, which is limited palettes in your illustration or your artwork, and the benefits of using a limited palette, of which there are many, I'm proud to say and happy to say, because I am somebody who has struggled. This is going to be a big confession, folks. Struggled with color my entire artistic life. Color has just been something that has been very difficult for me to master or even understand with any real, Anyway, point is, there are tricks you can use. One of them is to use a limited palette. It's going to simplify things for you. It's going to make things a little easier for you in your life. And we're going to talk about that today. Talk about the many ways that this is going to make things a little bit better for some of you out there. Now, some of you have a great color sense. Maybe it's innate. Maybe it's just that you went to 5 or 6 different color theory classes in school. Who knows? You figured it all out. Well, good for you. You know what? I'm not one of those people, so I know that I'm not alone, and I want to help folks out with that today. All right, so we're going to pop over to Photoshop here and take a look at a few samples of work by some other artists. Before we do that, just a quick hello. I see Cody, Umacore, and Christelle, and General Kenobi. Yes. Robert, Francis, nice to see you. Hey, Jack, what's up? Thanks for joining us yesterday for the hamster drawing. And did I say hi to Gareth? Like, yeah, I'm scrolling too fast. Hey, Jargana or Gargana? What's up? Nice to see you as well. Uriel, nice to see you. Gino, all these fine folks. Yeah, let us know where you're from. Let us know where you're watching. It'd be great to do that. And everybody can just chit-chat in there while we get started. Here we go. We are in Photoshop here looking at a few nice samples of work by several different artists. And all of these have something in common, which is they are using a limited palette. Okay, and so we're going to take a look at some of these more closely, and then we're going to go through some of the things that work because of that limited palette and what makes them so special. Starting up here in the top left, we are looking at a really great recent July New Yorker cover by the artist Christoph Niemann, currently of the great city of Berlin, Germany. And you can see that if I were to just go ahead and highlight some of the colors here, we're dealing with literally 1, 2, 3, and a 4 with one little tiny variation on that blue right there, and a little tiny variation on that orange for transitions. And that's it, gang, right there. Look at that. Now, what this does is it immediately allows us to focus on the design of the illustration, okay? This limited palette, all right, allows us to focus on all of these shapes and patterns in the work. If there were dozens of colors in here, we would be distracted by, and our eyes would be drawn to, all of those different colors and all the relationships of those colors when they are next to one another, butting up against each other, etc. And that's going to take away from what is really, in my opinion, more of a shape design exercise, a pattern design exercise in creating this beach scene here. The other cool thing about this is that that simplicity of that color palette is helping to reinforce the simplicity of the design itself. The way that everything in here, which is really, if you think about it, a lot of complexity, okay, potentially, being distilled down to these few really simple shapes for the figures, okay? And then what we've all observed before when we've been out on any body of water or next to any body of water, when it's either sunset or sunrise, and you're seeing what happens to the reflection of the light on the water. Now, a couple of things to point out about the brilliance of this particular illustration. even though it is a very flat illustration, there's no rendering, so to speak, of light and shadow, okay? We're not seeing things as three-dimensional objects because thanks to the artist, they've gone ahead and tried to work that out. No, none of that. However, I want you to note that there are still certain things that are being taken into consideration here, such as the size, okay, of the little dots that represent reflections on the water. Notice how they are much, much smaller in the distance, and the spacing between the rows, so to speak, okay, of these dots as they appear in lines traveling across, okay, is tighter. And as you get closer, they get larger and larger and spaced further apart. This is such a really, really smart acknowledgement of distance, okay, using pattern, but then changing the relationships of the specific elements of that pattern to reflect what's happening with perspective and with depth. Okay, just want to point that out. And because of the simple color palette, it's much easier to do that and to have it communicate the way it should to us that there is that distance. Okay, so what is the benefit of using the limited color palette here? All right, we just covered a few things here, but just to summarize, one, it allows us to focus on other things. And the strength of this illustration is really lying in its simplicity of shape and its design and pattern, right? This is not an illustration that is meant to show off the artist's ability to really, really understand all the nuance and all the subtlety in color. Okay, that is not the point of it. And so therefore, by limiting it, all right, we get a focus on other elements. The other thing is that you're honing in on colors that really, really simply represent things we're familiar with. Okay, if something is black, it is usually backlit. So the light is out here in the distance, and we are seeing the shadow, the back of the figure, which is not in the light. And so by simplifying that down to just pure black, that's silhouette, this gives us a sense of what is really happening with the light without doing it in an overly complex way. We also know about the sky being the orange with the reflections of the orange here. This gives us a time of day, a sense of a time of day, as well as temperature, like this heat, right? But time of day and all that communicated with just one simple color. Very, very bold, very powerful, very graphic. And finally, this slightly off-white color for our reflections. And that's all you need. So it's this giant exercise in taking all of the complexity of this and simplifying not just the shapes, not just the elements, okay? Water, for example, very, very difficult and complex thing to paint and draw. Taking all of that and simplifying it down to its absolute most basic possible form, almost to the point of symbols, okay? And then doing the same with the color. How far can I reduce this? And this is the result. So very, very nice. Let's move over here, okay, and look at this really, really gorgeous piece by the great concept artist and just fine artist, Nathan Fowkes. Nathan Fowkes, F-O-W-K-E-S. I believe based in California, doing work for DreamWorks and other studios and courses on schoolism and all kinds of great things. Looking at this piece by Nathan, we see a limited palette, and for me, there are a couple of things to talk about here with why is this beneficial for this illustration. Right off the bat, this to me gives me a time of, not just a time of day, but a sort of feeling of temperature. And it's an amazing achievement with just, we'll zoom in here just for a moment as I highlight these, just a few very well chosen spots, okay, in this entire piece, where what he has done is chosen to allow the sunlight to illuminate the facade of a building, okay, or the leaves of a bush there. Those three areas are just enough to give us a sense of temperature. And what I mean is like that warmth, that bright light of the sun okay, either early in the day or late in the day when the sun is no longer above us but is out off to the side and just hitting these facades, and while everything else is in these cool shadow colors, okay, the blues and the purples, so close to one another with the hue there, okay. But if you squint down and look at it, the value range is also really limited, with the exception of some high contrast here in the extreme foreground, okay. But if you were to just eliminate that altogether and take it in this enormous section of the illustration here, the painting here, that value range is pretty limited as well. But it's because of that limited color palette that we're able to appreciate that sense of cool in the shadows, cool away from the sun, and then we get just a hint of that sun actually being a part of the whole scene. We know it's there, and it's just bam, slicing through and hitting a couple of little spots. Now what I want to do, just for kicks, is we're on this layer here, and what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to isolate just this piece. We're going to go here in Photoshop to select color range, all right? And we're going to tap right here, and it's going to grab those little bits of color, and I'm going to increase the fuzziness, so to speak, okay? Hang on a minute. Whoops. Try that again. Select color range. Here we go. And we're just going to tap right here, and it's going to grab these little bits, okay? And we'll come over here and grab that little guy. Okay. And if I take that color, all right, now you notice it's grabbed a little bit of the sky and all that, and I'll go ahead and just eliminate those because they're really not part of what I want to play with here. I'm mostly interested in adjusting these little highlights of the sun here with the yellow, okay, all that. And I'm gonna just grab that to be sure that it gets it. And once I've done that, what I want to do is take these little areas, okay, and I'm going to go and open my hue and saturation sliders, Command U, and I'm just going to desaturate those and cool them off a little bit. Desaturate them here. Didn't get all of them, but did the same here for a minute. Just make sure that all of that color is pretty much gone. Now I want you to notice how different does that feel without that warmth, that contrast, okay, of the yellow against the blue, these complementary colors on the color wheel. Look at how different that is. And so this limited palette, right? This is one of the things about a limited palette is you can, one of the superpowers of a limited palette is to have the majority of a painting, all right, be painted with just a couple of colors that are close to one another, that are analogous to one another. Blues and purples and some really cool greens, as you see here, and not too much saturation. And then you can add so much drama by bouncing over to the other side of the color wheel, grabbing a color on the opposite end, and just punctuating here and there, boom, boom, right? And getting those spots to really come alive and glow, okay? Looking at it now, look at the difference there, all right? Pretty crazy when you see the two versions there. But yeah, so another benefit, of course, is mood, right? There's a sort of mood that comes about with these cool colors. A feeling of calm, a feeling of quiet. Maybe it's sort of a reflective kind of a mood, self-reflection, or peaceful, etc. And the other thing about this is that there's a lack of detail in the description of these elements in the landscape and in the buildings and so on. There's just enough information for us to understand what they are because the shapes are so carefully considered. But there's a soft edge to almost everything, sort of an out of focus kind of feel, or like they're receding into the distance. And again, the exception is some of these elements in the foreground where you're going to have sharpness of contrast, etc. But that really, really helps, again, to communicate more of that mood of almost a dreamy, dreamlike kind of feel. You're in a reverie, you know? So, very successful. Now, I want you to imagine this same painting at full saturation, like somebody has gone out to paint, and they're going to paint all the details and all of the different colors and everything that they see in this scene, and they're going to do it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's a completely different piece, isn't it? And so, you know, this is the great thing about being an illustrator, being an artist, is that you have these amazing magical powers to take a subject and present it to your viewer however you wish. You can take anything, and you can say to one artist, I would like for you to paint this, you know, I don't know, a bicycle on the side of the road. I want you to paint this bicycle on the side of the road, but I want you to make it feel sad and lonely and kind of, I want this to be a really cold feeling illustration. And then you can take it to another artist and say, okay, now for you, I want to make you to make it sunny and happy and exciting and full of potential. And all of this can be done with color and color choices and composition choices, right? And things like that, scale, etc. But yeah, it's pretty great to see that. Now here we have something by Dan Schultz. Dan Schultz is a painter. And I want you to just look at how limited things are here. We're really working with, okay, now a desaturated color palette. Now, the great thing about desaturation, let's talk about this for a moment. The more saturated your primaries are, or whatever colors are that you're mixing or working with, the greater the likelihood that you could run into some difficulty with color harmony. This is just how it is, especially when you're dealing with colors that, like primaries, are kind of bouncing around the color wheel. So if you have a red, a yellow, and a blue, if you have a red and it's just bright fire truck red, and your blue is a bright violet sky blue blend of, you know, the most saturated blue you can imagine, and then if you have a yellow that's absolute, you know, crazy bright yellow, imagine now you're trying to, with those three colors, paint something, and if you're using those colors in their purest state all over the place, you do wind up with something that's difficult to control. Okay, they start to just get away from you. So one of the benefits of using a limited color palette that's not only limited with the hues, but also the saturation, okay, we're just taking it all down, is that you have a better chance for color harmony because these colors are a little more muted, a little easier to control, and they've got a little bit of the other colors mixed in with them in order to bring them down in saturation. So this is a great example where really the main thing we're dealing here with is just a red and a blue. That's really kind of it, right? And that red is a nice brownish red, okay? And that blue is a very grayed down blue. And because already both of these colors have been brought down in saturation, because we're already limiting it just really to those two, what Dan was able to do here was focus on darks and lights, warms and cools, nothing else. I mean, it's an exercise in being able to just limit your attention as an artist on the things that you want to focus on without being distracted by all these many other things you have to deal with when you're really dealing with a full range of colors that you're trying to observe, understand, and accurately put down on canvas. So this is a very successful painting as a result. Just a thing to mention here, although this doesn't apply to many of you, especially if you're working digitally probably, but another thing that's possible with this kind of exercise is you can play up other things that the viewer might not notice or the artist might not care to bother with, such as, you see here, the brush strokes, super impasto, really thick, chunky brush strokes there. Part of probably the joy of making this piece and then the joy of looking at this piece is enjoying and noticing the brushwork. Okay, big chunky flat brush right there with lots of thick paint on it. If this were really just full of rich saturated colors all over the place, I would probably be so busy noticing those colors and how they pop and vibrate against one another, etc., that maybe some of that brushwork would get a little bit lost in the shuffle. All right, so it's interesting because when you bring the contrast, or the richness of the color or the complexity of the color, when you bring that down, you have the opportunity for other things to surface and take more attention. This is kind of what we talked about here as well. So moving on here, this is a Gary Kelly piece. Gary Kelly, famous illustrator, artist. Anybody who ever went into a Barnes & Noble in the 1990s, early 2000s will know his work in the cafe in Barnes & Noble. You would walk in and you'd see all these famous authors hanging out, talking to one another, or just reading or writing or drinking coffee or whatever. There were murals painted in those cafes, and that may be what he's best known for, at least to the public. But to the illustration crew, people know him for lots and lots of things. Great storybooks and illustrations through a lot of magazines and so on. Anyway, this is as limited as you can get. You could basically just choose one color or two colors that are right next to each other. Okay, in this case, like a blue and a violet, blue and purple here. And then you can just design your entire illustration around those. And obviously, this one's a little on the nose, kind of blue. It's a Miles Davis joint there. And you've got here John Coltrane, and I don't know who Cannonball is. Shame on me for not knowing. Bill, I'm going to guess, is the pianist, and I don't know who Bill was. I should know all these things. And maybe that's not Coltrane. Is it Coltrane? I think it's Coltrane. But that's besides the point. What are we looking at here? We're looking at colors and what you're able to do and what you're able to draw the attention of the viewer to when you are limiting the color. Okay, and of course, in this case, the strength of the drawing. Gary Kelly, brilliant draftsman. I mean, there's no question of that. Brilliant draftsman, brilliant designer of space. Okay, his compositions, his use of these different shapes where he breaks up sections of the rectangle or the space he's working in. Very cubist. Really effective. And, distortion and elongation and playing with anatomy and so on to suit the compositional needs. Very cool. A lot of that, though, okay, is really brought into clear focus because the color palette is not something that we're going to pay too much attention to. It all just sort of sits in the background. It becomes more of just a drawing exercise. We pay attention to the drawing, we pay attention to the composition and the characters and everything, and we're not distracted by these color choices at all, right? So that's another thing. So let's now look at all of these and let's talk about these benefits of using a limited palette one at a time. All right, and I'll hide these for a moment, and we'll just make ourselves a new layer. And while we talk, we can draw and do some other things. All right, so first things first. A limited palette does what? It simplifies things. And this goes to a bigger conversation about simplifying things in your art in general. One of the tasks of the artist is to look at this world in which we live and to try and take all that amazing stuff that we see out there and distill it down into this 2D rendering that people can look at and immediately understand. They understand that is a barn out in a field, and there's a cow over there, and it's late in the day. They get all that. But can you do that in a way where, with as few details as possible, can you sell that idea? And this is one of the reasons people like to look at art, is because it isn't the same as looking at the real world. It's not like just sitting and looking at your window, or it's not the same as a photograph, because personally I find photorealism to be not my bag, because that level of realism is something that I see simply looking in the natural world, and I don't want to see it in a illustration. I admire the technical skill that is required and the patience for that kind of work, but what I'd like to see when I look at art is something that just doesn't really exist in the natural world. It's a representation of what exists, but what's really great is I see the artist coming through and the choices they've made in how they depict a thing that I'm familiar with, and make me see it a new way because of the art. So one of the things we do is we try to simplify. And this goes down to when you're looking at your values. Okay, this is why people do exercises with pure black and white, just to try and really get down to, this is either on the dark side, this is on the light side, and I'm going to just push it as far as it'll go to simplify things at first. And then maybe I'll introduce a middle gray, and then maybe I'll introduce a 25% gray and a 75% gray, and so on. You know, or black, I should say. That process, right? So simplifying things does help you to get from blank page to finished art a lot faster. It also helps you to make interesting decisions because you're always trying to decide what to leave out. All right, what's really essential here? And so this is one of the benefits of a limited palette, is that you automatically are limiting yourself from the moment you start the work by deciding to work with limited colors. This frees you up, okay? It gives you a sense of relief almost. Frees you up to start working on other things and focusing on other things. Simplification is always a good thing, okay? That's what I believe, and that's, I think, something that you can carry with you when you're trying to work out anything in your art. I'll pause for a moment and see if we have any questions. This is, after all, a live show. Christelle, I agree. It's nothing simple or nothing easy about doing that. It is difficult, but that's part of the game. Hi, Cryo. Nice you to join us. Nice to see you. Yeah, Christelle, Gary Kelly, great composition, great artist. Barbara, thank you for joining us. Hi. Yeah, Van Gogh did some interesting things with that for sure, where he really was interpreting the world he saw around him, not trying to simply make it look exactly like what was there in front of his eyes. We can certainly agree on that. They don't really focus on the legibility of the New Yorker, but they don't have to do it. They are a reference. Let's see, perspective, yes. Garrett's been enjoying a limited palette lately. Cool, glad to know it, All right, so we are here in Photoshop, and while I'm talking about limited palettes, why don't we look at some ways to create one very easily? Because I think that that's a great thing you can do right on the outset if you want to just play around with color and start to see what works, what doesn't work, and figure that out for yourselves. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my brushes, and I've done this before if you followed along with these classes where I've mixed palettes and so on. So I'm going to do something similar where I'm going to mix a little limited palette for myself and play around with it. We'll talk about things I'm going to be trying with that as well. All right, so let's go ahead, and if you look at the mega pack here, okay, there are a couple of brushes inside the paint box that will serve you well for this purpose, because what I'm looking for is a brush that will allow me to use the pressure that I'm exerting with my stylus to control the opacity of the paint that I'm putting down. And I also want it to feel kind of painterly and have a nice stroke quality to it. So this is a brush I come to all the time, this creamy variation brush for this exercise. And this is in the Mega Pack paint box. If you don't know where to get the brushes, don't worry, you can simply Google Get Kyle's Brushes. That'll take you to the download page. If you don't want to do that, in your brushes panel, you can use this little drop-down menu and go to Get More Brushes, and that's where you can sign in with your Adobe ID. There are over 2,000 brushes for you to grab, and there are more being added every quarter, so lots to play with. All right, so here you go, creamy variation. Now, first things first, we'll start just really, really basic, okay? We were talking about primaries a moment ago, so if you want to, you can just go ahead and throw down some really basic primaries. Okay, this is not going to be rocket science here, gang. Okay, now, like I mentioned before, if you're going to deal with colors like this, one of the things you're going to maybe run into as a problem is going to be trying to work around such bright colors. Now, I have seen artists successfully do this. They'll grab just these 3 colors and do this. Here we go. I grab the color, and I look over here at my color wheel, and I could just do this manually. I can just sort of slide up towards the white, like that. All right, and I can just throw a little color down here. I can do this, grab the blue, do the same kind of exercise. Grab the yellow, do the same kind of exercise. Okay, and then with the blue, just go super dark down here and throw that there. And then take this palette and just go to town. Odds are you're going to do something interesting because we all respond to and react to these colors, and they are super saturated, and that's fine. And for a very specific kind of illustration, you could totally get away with this, no problem. You know, you're going to focus more on shape and other things. Maybe it's like more of a very highly stylized graphic kind of an illustration exercise. You've got your super dark there. You've got a kind of a medium tone with that blue. And the way you can check these values is you can simply add a layer on top of everything else. Go ahead and fill it with black, and then just set the blending mode here to hue or to color. And you'll see here, it's not a terrible range of values. You know, you could probably make do with that. All right, so right off the bat, that's one thing you could do. Now, if you're interested in this kind of approach, okay, a little trick to make it a little less boring, since we see these colors all the time. It's not that they don't work, they're fine. You know, I can do this. Actually, I'll make myself a little rectangle in which to work to make it simple. But watch this. Here, we just take this, and we put a little face right here. Okay. We can even do this kind of a thing. We can just sort of use that middle sort of tone right there just to sort of soften these transitions. Okay. But you know what I'm doing here, right? We're just building out a little face with those values there. Grab the dark. And we do that. And we do a bit of that. And then we grab any of these other colors. Just kind of paint around it. And you know, this is fine. This'll take care of business for now. Put that ear back there and put that hair back there. Make sure this anatomy makes sense. No big whoop. Okay. All right, so I haven't even used the red, so I can come in there later and I can fiddle with that. Just add some tone. Right? All right. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. We've got this pink color. Can play around with that because it's similar to the yellow, so they're just gonna have like a little party back there. maybe you could suggest some kind of environment, you know, like some buildings or something. All right, there's really not much danger here of you screwing anything up. You're probably going to be fine with this palette. Nothing. It's not going to. You're not breaking any ground, and that's fine. But what I was going to show you was, if you want to try and get a little bit more bold, if you're going to kind of go this route. Okay, what you can do, and we could do like a little, just add a shape up there. It just looks a little bit more interesting, I guess. Now I'm starting to get into like designing stuff, and I don't want to. It's always dangerous to start to get too detailed. All right, but anyway, so I do this now. That's all, you know, based on these, okay, and it's fine. It's not that exciting, and probably there are a lot of other interesting choices you can make. But in the interest of time, I'm gonna move on and show you this. So we've got what you consider sort of these basic everyday primaries everyone always talks about: red, yellow, blue. What if you do this? What if you do this? Just try this exercise here, okay? I've got this here. I'm going to duplicate this layer and just I'm going to throw this down here, and I'm going to make it a little smaller like that. Okay. I'm going to take those colors that I used to create it, move those over here. And in this original layer, I'll do the same thing. We're going to just slide those down, and we're going to take that that guy and size him down as well, so he's the same size there. All right, so our original uses the red, yellow, and the blue. Now let's do this. You've already got a relationship here where if you look at your color wheel, you're here, you're here, you're here. Okay, this is kind of where you are. What if I take those colors and I just push them one direction or another? Okay, what would that do? So with our copy down here, I'll just do that. I'll open up my hue and saturation sliders, and because I have this general slider that pushes everything, okay, I can just start doing this. I can push it down there, and then I can do things like this, reduce the saturation a little bit. Okay. Now, that's way more interesting and unexpected than this. Okay. So, starting with these three colors, and then employing the same technique of just bumping up towards the white, grabbing a dark, super dark, dark, and then playing around. Just doing that as a starting point, as opposed to going safe and doing what you know, okay, could yield some very interesting results. All right, and you could wind up with something that for you personally is exciting, but also for the viewers a little unexpected. And the fact is, if you get your other stuff working nicely, like values, darks, lights, mids, etc., if there's enough balance and things read clearly, as you've seen with other classes I've done, it doesn't always really matter what the colors are, but this is just a really simple, easy thing to try, okay? And since we have this here, we have our little original here, I can also, I'll make this a little smaller here. I can take this layer, slide it over here. We can try going the other way, just push it this way. Okay. Maybe like that. It's kind of cool. Bring that saturation down. And there's a different result. Okay, so it's kind of fun to just try this. And, you know, regardless of what the illustration is, you know, that to me is less interesting, okay, than what's happening over here as far as a palette goes. Okay, it's kind of like a split complementary kind of situation here. That to me is pretty interesting, right? All right, so that's one thing I want you to think about, and we'll just group that together. Now, using that same technique, we were just talking about saturation, right? Could you make your life simpler by doing this? If you have, again, these really bright colors, okay? And we grab our blue here. Something like that. All right, here's where we're starting from. If I take that blue and I just do this, I'm just pulling it down here, desaturating it quite a bit, right? Just really knocking that down. Put that over here. What if I start with that, right? It doesn't look like that big of a difference, but it is. Look at what I've done over here. You could even go further in that. You could go like to a real gray, you know, but it's still got some color in it. And then what about this red? Can we like take that red down, brown it up a little bit here? Can that be my red? Okay. And this yellow, can we take that yellow? And can we take this yellow and can we do this? Look, I'm just gonna push it down this way. Okay, move it a little warmer like this. So it's almost like sort of a something like that. Like it's sort of a yellow ochre or something. All right, now this, to me, 1, 2, 3, okay? And just for good measure, we can add a green. We can take a green and really like just warm that up. It's like I'm looking out the window right now and I see grass, okay? And what I see for grass is basically this kind of color. Okay, not this, right? You do that to yourself, holy Christmas, you're in trouble, because that's going to be hard to work with. But if I look at these now and I say, okay, I'm going to start here. Whoops, I grabbed the wrong red. Just cover that up. There we go. I said I'm going to start here. And the thing about it is you have these kinds of colors a little desaturated, right? What I love is that when you need it, okay, just as a little punch, if I take this color and look, if I just push it a little lighter like that, put it right there, that's got a lot of bright, powerful saturation all of a sudden, you know, especially if I pop it here on this field here, or put it here. Okay, it starts to feel like a nice pink kind of color, but it's really not very saturated at all. So by doing this, what I'm doing is I'm simplifying things for myself and I'm adding a lot of color harmony because, again, things are reduced in saturation. It's a little easier to manage, a little easier to control. Okay, it doesn't guarantee great results, but it is going to push me along a little better to start with. And now, just like those other exercises you've seen me do, what I like to do is grab a color, okay, and then grab another and do this. I use light pressure. This is why I use light pressure, so I can grab the two of them and I can paint over what's there and create another color from those two. Okay, I can grab that green and I can mix it with that red right here, and whatever the result is, throw that down here. And what you see me creating are more neutral colors. All right, and so this brings up an interesting thing about limiting your color palette. Sometimes limiting your color palette means simply using fewer bright, bold colors in general. All right, look around the room you're in. How many of the colors in the room that you're looking at are really bright and, you know, just knocking your socks off? Like, wow, that's a bright saturated color. Okay, or even just look outside. There are lots and lots of neutrals punctuated by some color. And even that color that you see, a lot of times the color itself is not quite as saturated and brilliant as you think it is. But when compared to whatever's next to it or surrounding it or nearby, it seems like it is. It seems like it's bright and really saturated, and that's just the nature of color. And so by starting in this kind of a zone, okay, it gives me a lot of room to play with more neutrals, okay? Grab some of this right here. Let's throw that on there and see what happens. Just throw that over there. Look at this. Getting some really nice colors here. So I'm getting all these, and you can start to mix secondaries together. Nice gray right there. And then what I can do is with this red, okay, for example, is I can just for kicks pop it up in this direction a little bit. Just throw that in there as an accent. Say, okay, I'm gonna come use that at some point. Maybe that could be a really good pop right there. This green right here, just pop it up that way for a second. Throw that in there, okay? And now I've got these two opposites, right, that I can bounce against each other and see what happens. Like if I take this right here, I take this and just throw it in there. That looks really super saturated, okay, because it's surrounded by that red, basically. Yeah, but look over here, it's not super saturated, okay? My saturation goes from left to right here, so we're not even at 50% really. But the result here is pretty great, okay? Do the same thing with your yellow. Just pop it up this way. Right here. Throw that in there just in case you need it for an accent or something like that. You saw how Nathan Fowkes did it with the light hitting the side of the wall and tops of little bushes and stuff there. All right, so you bring down the saturation to increase the likelihood of color harmony. This is gonna be a great thing. All right, so with these colors, what else can we do? Well, one thing you can do is you can decide, do I want one of these to sort of dominate? Okay, and then do I want to use another, maybe the complementary color, to show up now and then to just sort of really make things sing or bring out a focal point in your illustration? So just as an example, maybe, okay, this green here, let's imagine that we're painting with this green, and I'm gonna skip steps here because normally I would grab this. I'll just do it. Use my dark here, right here. Take that blue and make it super dark. And then I would do this, just like mix it over top of the green and get a nice dark rich green or whatever. So maybe I've got this situation where we're in some kind of a lush sort of green environment, and I've got some grass and some plants and some trees and things all around. Okay, and like the light is just sort of here and there, sprinkled around through here. Okay, but basically I'm just sort of covering things around with this green palette. Okay, green, 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 green everywhere you look. If you look at that Nathan Fowkes, you remember it's like the blues and the violets, right, for all those shapes and all that business. And then off in the distance here, I take this blue, and what I do is I mix it with a bit of that yellow, just to sort of lighten it. Then the blue is going to knock that saturation down. And that's off there as another color to just kind of maybe be like a sky, or who knows, whatever. But then we got more foliage just kind of popping in through the background here. Okay. And what I do then, all right, just sort of frame this all around. Now if I do this, and have like a sort of a, this is like a Red Riding Hood thing, okay? If I take that red and I mix it with that dark right here, that becomes my sort of shadow color in there. What I've done is I've taken that red and parts of the red and then like variants on the original color there, surrounded it by that green, right? Surrounded it with that green. And if I take this darker green and pop it up against there, okay, look at what that does. Got some dark area here. Just have this cloaked figure here. Use that lighter green on the other side just for like the top of some bush there or something, and another one right there, whatever. And just against that dark color, that'll help add some interest there. Okay, but now this is really just a story of two colors, okay, interacting with each other. And what it does is it makes it really easy for me to, for the viewer, okay, also by adding like a bit more detail in this area. If I just even do this, if I zoom out way back here, okay, it sticks out like a sore thumb. You go, hey, hey buddy, this is where you should be looking. Look here, right? Focal point. Couldn't make it any more obvious than that. All right. And so that's the magic of being able to simplify things down and use these two colors and play them off one another and get that to work. Now you can start to really play with saturation. You can go even brighter and then really just here and there. See that? Couple little shots. That's all it takes right there. Go a little darker there. Knock that in. Okay, core shadow right there. I'm starting to get too fancy, but see what I mean? So this helps me, this simplifies my life, this makes my life easier. I'm not gonna freak out, okay, about trying to sort these things. And now, once I do this though, the great thing is now if I want to, I can introduce some more complexity and some other business and stuff later. But this is a good thing to start off with, just to try and get things rolling. And I'm not dealing with 12 different colors, or 24 or 36 or whatever the paint set is I'm working with, or the color palette. Or in this case with digital art, of course, millions upon millions upon millions of colors. So this will simplify my life, okay? Now, another trick I've used is this. Pick a color. Start with a color, okay? Just throw it on down, make a little selection, Option Delete, fill with the foreground color. I take a color and then I just select part of it right here. So I'm gonna do this into thirds. Watch, I go here. One, grab that lower third there. Command U, I pull up my hue saturation sliders, and I decide I'm going to push 50 degrees, 30 degrees, sorry, here we go, 30 degrees to the left and say OK. Then I'm going to move that selection up this way. Command U, move 30 degrees in the opposite direction. Boom. And I start with that, take the whole thing, okay, slide it on over, duplicate it. I'll hide this for a moment so you can see this clearly. And then I can take it and I can tint it basically with another color. So the way I do that is I make another layer, and I'm over here on this side of the color wheel, right? So what I do is I'll bounce over this way, all right, slide on down a little ways this way or that way, doesn't matter. So we do like a sort of a split complementary thing. So I'm over here right now. I'm going to move this way, move down here. Okay, so I'll just tap over there. All right, there's my color. I notice that it's not print safe, so I just tap on that little warning sign. I'm good to go. And I make a little rectangle here on a new layer, and I just fill it with that color, and I come to my blending modes. All right, and I've got things I can do with this, like the hard light setting, for example. Linear light, you know, play around with these, find something cool. I like that hard light look. You can also do something like multiply and then reduce the opacity, those kinds of things. Okay, let's look at the hard light. So now I can then come over here and start doing this. And this palette, believe it or not, could be really effective. Grab that original right there and helping me build out something kind of interesting. Grab that, throw it down, grab this, throw it down, do that blend I was doing before, mix the two, using the opacity, okay. Grab that, mix it with this, here we go, etc., and then build out a palette that way. So taking advantage of layer blending modes and working with it that way, you can do all kinds of neat stuff, okay, really neat stuff. But try out these things you're going to find. So to summarize it, you're going to have simplify color mixing when you work with fewer colors. That goes without saying. You're going to simplify your color mixing. Okay, that's number one. You're also going to be able to better understand how your colors work together, because if you're looking at the colors, all right, and there are only so many, you only have so many experiments you can do with facing them one opposite the other, etc., making them one darker, making one lighter, working with those relationships. There are fewer of them, easier to distill it down to some more simple math, so to speak, for you to work with, and that's great. And last but not least, you will have more control over what it is that you want to control with a limited palette. If you want something to be darker, if you want something to be lighter, if you want it to be warmer or cooler, you know which colors in the palette you've selected are going to achieve that, because you only have a limited number to choose from. So this is a really great thing. It's going to allow you to focus much more easily on what it is you're trying to say with the illustration. What's the message? What's the theme? What's the mood? What's the subject? What's the focal point? Etc., etc. All these things are going to fall into place a lot more easily, okay? So we can talk about more of this stuff if you want later on down the road. Just let me know. Hit me up on Twitter at Kyle T. Webster, okay? Check out the other master classes. There are lots and lots and lots of them here on YouTube. And in the meantime, I want you to say, have a nice weekend. It's Friday. It's time to go do something else and chill out. And take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And I will say ciao for now.